So, Dennis, by the time you left Rice High School, you held state class records in the mile, the 2 mile, the 3 mile, and perhaps one of the greatest marks that a high school runner can lay claim to. You ran the second fastest indoor flat mile at 4:15 at the legendary Armory. Do you remember that race and can you share your recollection of it?
You know, Ron, I'm chuckling to myself because I really have little memory of that race.
Mhm.
So maybe I passed out after the race, crossing the finish line or something. I don't know. I know I ran it because I've seen news clippings about it, but I really don't remember it. Um, there is another race that I do remember very well in
Mhm.
high school, and that would be the 1969 Penn Relays
The
Distance Medley
distance
Relay.
medley? Yes, yes.
You
Tell us about
know,
it, Dennis.
and I remember that for a whole host of reasons, some of which have actually nothing to do with the race.
Mhm.
But this was the first time our team traveled outside of the state of New York for a track meet. It was the first time that we had been overnight anywhere to stay in a hotel. And at Penn, as you guys know, there are thousands of spectators. We didn't have thousands of spectators at our meets in high school. It was also the first time that I would be running on a synthetic track. And the competition was really tough. Luckily for my Rice team, um, many of these other teams that we were competing against, we had already run against in New York in the Armory or at Downing Stadium. So we were familiar with many of them. But the competition was tough, and we won. And so that was an extraordinary accomplishment. And we went out and warmed down, ran around campus and all this other stuff. Um, but after came back to the stadium, and I'm thinking about a young man that I ran against a couple of times in high school, not many, but a few times. And I wanted to reach out to him to get his take on college and college track and field. So I was asking people, can you point me to the Penn team, the Penn coach? Where are they sitting? And I was directed to the north stands, and they said, oh, they're up there. And so I climbed the steps and found a group of athletes, and I said, where's the coach? They directed me to the coach. We talked for about a half hour, maybe a little longer. And so I'm looking around the whole time.
Mhm.
And so I'm getting ready to leave. And I said, well, coach, where's Julio? You know, and coach looks at me and he says, Julio. I said, yeah, Piazza. Where's Piazza? And he says, Piazza goes to Penn. And I said, well, aren't you the Penn coach? And he says, no, I'm the Penn State coach.
No,
So
no.
Harry Groves and I, we chuckled about that, about our meeting. We became lifelong friends. I miss him dearly, but it was Giulio Piazza that I was looking for because Giulio and I had a few races together in high school. I really admired him, and he was doing great things here at Penn.
Dennis, that's awesome. Dennis, one thing that you didn't say about that distance medley relay is you were 40 yards behind Power Memorial in that race. You and I have joked about Nehemiah and his comeback at the Penn relays. I think you were Nehemiah before Nehemiah was Nehemiah.
Well, let's put it this way. I didn't get the baton in first.
There we
So
go.
I had my work cut out for us. And there's some dispute as to how far I really was behind. Personally, I think it was more than 40 yards, but that's besides the point.
That's all right. You came away
We,
from
we,
the
we won, and that's all that matters.
Dennis, that's awesome. Dennis, on a little bit of a serious note, you've talked about competing as a Black American in long distance and middle distance races, and you'd often look around and you didn't see many people that looked like you. You said that it did carry weight and it was something that you were always conscious of. How'd you handle it? And were there role models that helped you go ahead and navigate that?
Well, back in high school and today, and it may be more relevant today than when I was in high school, but I remember making a quote, my world revolves around my being Black. It was true then, I think it's even truer now. Experiences of young Black men they are our experiences. We own them. And going back to the late 60s, early 70s, when I was in high school, you know, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movements, they were at their height. And the topic of race and racial equality was everywhere. And sport was no exception. And of course, there were stereotypes then, there are stereotypes today. Regrettably, some of the same stereotypes exist today. And one of those stereotypes was pertaining to Blacks and the sport of track and field, was that Blacks were relegated to sprints, jumps, maybe the throws, but certainly not distance running. You know, as a distance runner, you know, I was a novelty. To say I was a novelty would be an understatement. This was especially true in cross country. You know, and my brother and I, we talked about it. You know, and as I believe I mentioned earlier, he informed me about Byron Dice and the success that Byron was having at NYU in cross country. You know, so that was who became my role model. You know, and the way I dealt with it was to run as fast as I could, to become as accomplished as I could. But, you know, and I had my successes freshman year, and I came to realize early on that if I continued to be successful, that maybe I could change that stereotype, opening doors for more young Black boys, girls, whatever, to run the middle distances and the distances, especially the distances. I mean, let's face it, there were certainly Black high school students and age group students who were running the quarter and the half mile.
Absolutely.
But not so much in the mile, and certainly not cross country.
Agreed. Dennis, you'll be surprised about the impact that you've actually had on some others. A little bit later on the program, we're going to talk to two world-class athletes that you had an incredible impact on them as runners and as people. So stay tuned for that. So your legendary high school career is getting ready to come to an end. It's 1970. It'd be an understatement to say that you were highly recruited, and you've shared with a few of us that you actually hated the recruitment process, and you considered joining a Catholic men's organization or order as opposed to even going to college. Can you tell us about that process and how you ultimately ended up coming to Penn?
Well, you know, while I was in high school, I think it was in '69, I guess I wrote this thing at the end of my junior year. My profile in Black was an article that I had written, and it got republished in Sport Magazine. But one of the quotes from that article, I'll read it to you. Being Denis Fikes, I can go to practically any college I want. But being Black, I am forced to go to the college that can offer me the most upon graduation. I truly believe that at the time. I believe there's some truth to that today. But with regards to college athletic recruiting, I view it as a necessary evil. It is evil, Ron. College recruiting causes really good people to lie and tell half-truths, whether you're the coach or you're the athlete that's being recruited. I mean, as an example would be, by your sophomore year, we'll have a field house. Or, coach, your school is my first priority. You know, everybody's telling these little half-truths for their own benefit. For me, I guess one of the reasons why I didn't buy into it and why I didn't like it was because, as you've already mentioned, it was my plan to go back to seminary. You know, I wasn't planning on going to college to run. So I wasn't all that interested in being recruited. But, you know, there are some forces beyond your control. I couldn't stop the coaches from reaching out to me, couldn't stop them, although I did try. I started receiving recruiting calls and letters prior to the end of my sophomore cross-country season.
Wow. Which,
you know, way too early. And there was one occasion that year where I got a phone call from Jumbo Elliott of Villanova fame. And I said to Jumbo, I said, you know, Mr. Elliott, I would really appreciate it if he wouldn't call me again until I've started my senior year. And I think, you know, for Jumbo, he had never had an athlete say that to him.
That's right.
You know, so he didn't know how to respond. So the phone call ended rather quickly after that. But, you know, I got 2 more phone calls that evening. One from the assistant coach at Villanova, and then the last one was from an alumnus, basically chastising me for being rude to Mr. Elliott. You know, so that's sort of what recruiting does to people, you know, but, you know, I was still thinking, I'm going back to the brotherhood. Why do I need this?
So what ultimately convinced you that Penn was the place for you? We're happy about it, but we're interested in hearing your perspective about it.
Well, you know, I think what convinced me for Penn, let me just say this. My senior year, I was really struggling. I mean, the cross-country season was over. The Denis Fikes show was ending, as some people had called that cross-country season. And we're moving into indoor and outdoor track. Indoors was reasonably successful, but I was in turmoil trying to figure out, you know, am I going to college, not going to college? Am I going to continue to run or not? And I was struggling with that. And so my competitions were suffering greatly. That spring at Penn Relays, my relay team gave me the baton in a much better place than they had the year before. We should have been able to defend, but we did not. I was not into racing, not into competing. We lost that race. A week later at the New York Relays, I'm running the DMR again, anchor leg, going up against my crosstown rival, Tony Colon of Power Memorial.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony pulls up on my side to go by, and I just let him go by. And as he's going by, you know, he sort of like looks over at me and he says,
"What's wrong with you?"
You know, something to the effect, if you're not gonna blank and run, get the F off the track. You know,
Got it.
You know, so for me, that was a big wake-up call. But around that same time, you know, right after the relays, after the Penn relays, Tup and I did talk. Tup didn't give up on me, even though prior to the relays, I had verbally committed to Manhattan. But after the Penn relays and that lackluster performance, Tup and I talked, and you know, just wanted to give me a shoulder, an outlet, like what's going on. And so he was the first person, the first coach that I told about what was really going on with me, about the brotherhood and the like. And at that point, Tup's non-recruitment of Denis Fikes started. Tup left me alone. It didn't mean that Penn alumni left me alone, because there were still a few alums who wanted me to go to Penn.
Right.
In fact, I was at the home of a Penn alum, and we were talking about my future and everything. And the alum said he didn't like Manhattan. He really thought I should go to Penn. My mom pipes up and says, "Well, I don't like the Manhattan coach, and that Villanova coach is a gangster." You know, she wasn't a fan of Jumbos either. And she then said, I think Denis should get out of New York, and I want him to go to Penn. And so at that point, I went back to my high school principal, mm-hmm. and had a heart-to-heart with him. Brother Morgan and I, we talked, and he basically said to me, he said, you know, if you go to seminary, there aren't any track teams at seminary. You won't be able to run. And his fear for me was that I would become unhappy, angry, and the like, and that I might even drop out of seminary because I wasn't running. So his advice to me was to not go to seminary, mm-hmm. To go to college, to go to the best academic school that I could. He didn't suggest a school. He just said, go to the best school you can get into. And so all those things came together. And I think it was probably a week or so after the New York relays that I called Tup up and I said, Tup, I said, Mr. Tuppeny, I've decided I'm going to run in college and I want it to be at Penn.